Silence does not arrive suddenly. It seeps through the spaces between one thought and another until the inner sound turns into presence. The body senses it before the mind does. The air feels denser, time expands, and a deep awareness begins to pulse. It is not the absence of sound, but a listening without direction, as if life itself were breathing from within. At this point, words lose their function. What once was speech becomes vibration, and what once was seeking becomes recognition. Awakening does not announce itself. It simply settles discreetly where noise no longer dwells. Some truths cannot fit into syllables. They move like subtle waves that pass through the field of being before the mind can decipher them. When consciousness begins to expand, the word becomes a trace. It tries to keep up with the vastness of what is being perceived, but always lags one step behind. The sentences that once seemed capable of containing the world become small before the magnitude of feeling. It is at this point that awakening deepens, not through the accumulation of concepts, but through the natural slide towards silence. The word was created to translate the invisible into form, to give body to what escapes. But what happens when the invisible reveals itself directly, without the need for translation? The mind, accustomed to the dominion of discourse, tries to react, to frame the mystery, to explain it, to name it. Yet the very attempt dissolves in the presence of the real. What once was the need to define becomes the willingness to listen, and silence begins to teach, not with arguments, but with frequency. There is a delicate difference between silence that is emptiness and silence that is fullness. The first is lack, the second is field. When quantum consciousness manifests, it does not appear as the absence of movement, but as pure movement, so coherent that it no longer needs sound to exist. Within this field, every thought seems like a small wave trying to touch an ocean. Little by little, the being learns to remain on the calm surface of this inner sea, where the slightest mental noise distorts the perception of truth. The learning is simple and subtle. To be silent is not to deny the world, but to tune it. Modern physics describes reality as a dance of interconnected vibrations. At the subatomic level, there is no fixed form, only resonant fields. When the observer becomes aware of this dynamic, something changes in their relationship with the word. The verb, once used to control the world, becomes a tool of attunement. To speak becomes to choose a frequency, and choosing a frequency requires silence, because only silence allows one to hear what is already vibrating. It is the same principle as a string that must be tuned. If there is too much noise, the note is lost. The silence of awakening is not imposed. It is neither discipline nor escape. It is the natural consequence of realizing that reality communicates in other ways. The awakened being discovers that the space between two words contains more information than the words themselves. The interval, that moment of pause, almost imperceptible, is where truth vibrates. It is where energy organizes meaning before thought translates it. Thus, each breath becomes a secret language between the universe and the consciousness that observes it. In this state, speaking becomes an act of precision. Every sound uttered is chosen with care, not out of fear of error, but out of respect for the force that sustains it. Words cease to be walls and become bridges. They no longer serve to convince, but to bear witness. To say something is merely to allow an inner vibration to become audible. When this vibration aligns with the silence of origin, speech ceases to be personal. It begins to carry the quality of a prayer without religion, a communication that rises from the field and returns to the field. Those who awaken feel the difference in the body. The voice changes, the rhythm of speech slows, the gaze becomes more patient. Conversations stop seeking dominance and begin to seek presence. Even the way of listening transforms. One no longer waits for their turn to reply, but for the moment when the other reveals themselves. Silence now is an active part of dialogue. It is within it that the energy of encounter organizes itself, and when two consciousnesses vibrate in resonance, something happens that no explanation can translate. It is as if an ancient truth remembered itself, recognizing its reflection through two bodies that simply look at each other. In this new way of being, words become instruments of harmony. They are no longer the center of experience, but its fleeting traces. Silence, in turn, is the constant background, the field where everything unfolds. It is within it that the observer meets themselves, others, and the whole. Communication, once an exchange of information, becomes an exchange of frequencies. And within this vibrational space, every intention, every emotion, and every pause are understood as languages of the field. Detachment from words is not disinterest in communication, but its expansion. When the being no longer depends on the verb to express itself, feeling takes its natural place as a direct means of knowing. Perception becomes broader, for the filter of language no longer interferes. What once required explanation now reveals itself in a simple state of presence. And this presence speaks even without sound. It communicates what is essential, not through the mind, but through the quantum field of consciousness that vibrates through everything. In the end, silence does not replace words. It sustains them, restoring the weight they had lost in the noise of thought. The truth that vibrates in silence does not deny speech. It purifies it. And when the verb is reborn from this space, it is no longer mental. It is energy in the form of sound. Each sentence becomes a wave of coherence, crossing the space-time of listening. Thus, those who awaken do not speak less by choice, but because they have learned to hear what the universe whispers when the mind falls silent. When thought tries to name the unnameable, its structure unravels like mist under the sun. Linear reasoning, accustomed to dividing reality into understandable parts, realizes it stands before something that cannot be captured. The mind seeks concepts, but energy does not submit to logic. It speaks in pulses, in rhythms, in waves that the intellect merely grazes without managing to hold. It is at this limit that the mental verb begins to dissolve, and feeling becomes the original language of being. Within the vibrational field, every form is a temporary expression of a continuous flow. Common language works with boundaries, subject, object, verb. But the language of energy ignores separations. It communicates through coherence, not grammar. Each vibration is a message. Each resonance is a phrase without words, spoken directly to the subtle body. When the being begins to perceive this, speech loses density. What once was assertion becomes a simple reverberation of the field. Between two breaths, the mind realizes it is no longer the author of thoughts. They arise, move, and vanish like particles in suspension. The observer, who once believed themselves the center of discourse, becomes only a point of attention within a living network. Thinking ceases to be creation and becomes listening. Ideas arrive as frequencies, not as arguments, and communication occurs between fields, mind and energy exchanging data without intermediaries. Bodies also speak, even if the rational ear cannot perceive it. Each cell emits patterns of light and sound, small signals that compose the vibrational language of the organism. When consciousness aligns with this perception, it begins to understand the invisible dialogue among the parts of its own being. A thought out of balance alters the cellular rhythm. A coherent emotion reorganizes the field. This silent communication is the true conversation between mind and energy. Sounds, gestures, and gazes become imperfect translations of something vaster. Energy does not need the word to express itself. It manifests through presence. A simple meeting of eyes can carry more quantum information than a long discourse. When two consciousnesses recognize each other, there is an instant fusion of frequencies. The mental verb falls silent, and feeling takes command. In that instant, love is not emotion, it is attunement. To perceive this language requires surrender. The mind tries to understand, but understanding is not an act of analysis. It is a state of coherence. One who seeks to comprehend must first align vibrationally with what they wish to know. The field responds through resonance, not logic. Thus, when the mind grows quiet, knowledge arrives as integral perception, as if the entire body knew without needing to think. Energy speaks in spirals. Each coherent thought amplifies vibration. Each resistance creates interference. Learning to listen to the field is an exercise in sensitivity and humility. It is not about interpreting signals, but about becoming permeable to them. When attention ceases to contract in search of control, energy reveals its language: pulses, temperatures, lightnesses, densities. The translation happens in the body, not in the intellect. Many call this experience intuition, but it is something prior to any label. It is a direct communication between consciousness and the quantum field that sustains it. There are no symbols or dictionaries, only vibrational recognition that crosses time and space. Everything that exists speaks, even if in different frequencies. Stones, plants, emotions, memories, all emit patterns that the awakened mind begins to decipher not through logic, but through presence. Silence and sound become complementary within this process. The mental verb dissolves not because it loses power, but because it discovers its true origin, the vibrant silence that precedes it. To speak after understanding this is a sacred act. Each word must be born aligned with the energy that generated it, otherwise it breaks the harmony of the field. Thus, conscious speech is brief, dense, transparent. It does not seek to persuade, it merely expresses what is already evident on the vibrational plane. Every attempt to impose meaning reveals noise. The learning of awakening is to unlearn the effort to explain. When the language of energy becomes fluid, the verb withdraws so that feeling may lead, and what arises is a living, mutable communication that springs from the present moment. Thought ceases to be narrator and becomes instrument. The self ceases to be emitter and becomes channel. In this state, energy speaks through everything, through breath, skin, the light that touches the face. The mental verb, then, is no longer necessary. It exists, but serves only as a gentle echo of the energy that moves. The word becomes light, almost transparent. To speak is to vibrate, and to vibrate is to pray. Meaning arises through resonance, not explanation. Everything communicates with everything, and the truth that once seemed distant reveals itself as a constant frequency within the being itself. The dissolution of the verb is the return to the original language, pure vibration, where the real and the sacred are the same movement. Feeling is the universe's first language. Before thought organizes reality into words, the experience is already vibrating within the body as a field of pure information. Each emotion carries a geometry, a vibrational signature that reveals more than 1,000 theories. The awakened soul recognizes this not as a concept, but as lived experience. Feeling becomes the key that opens the subtle layers of perception, and the world comes to be read with the whole body, not just the mind. Ancient memories resurface in the form of sensations, not stories. A memory no longer arrives as a narrative, but as temperature, aroma, pulse. Awakening changes the way time is perceived. The past presents itself as a vibration still active, the future as a frequency in formation. Translating these perceptions into words would impoverish them. That is why the awakened soul prefers to feel, not out of mental laziness, but out of respect for the complexity of what is being revealed. Each emotion, when observed without judgment, reveals a field of wisdom. Fear shows the boundary that asks for expansion. Anger indicates where energy has been compressed. Sadness purifies what needs to be released. The mind seeks causes. Feeling shows directions. Thus, understanding ceases to be an analytical act and becomes a form of attunement. To understand is to align. To know is to vibrate in coherence with what is perceived. Subtle movements happen within the body when feeling is welcomed. The breath deepens, the gaze softens, the muscles open. The whole body responds as if it had finally been heard. There is no need to decipher. The listening itself already transforms. This silent understanding is the heart of quantum consciousness. The observer does not alter the phenomenon merely by analyzing it, but by feeling it in a present and total way. Flowing with emotions is not the same as getting lost in them. Conscious feeling does not drown, it guides. Each sensation is a passing wave, and awakening teaches how to surf them without resistance. The old mind wanted to control the sea. The awakened mind learns to dance with it. Thus, the being begins to move in harmony with the nature of the field, without struggle, without escape, only perception. Inner spaces expand as feeling deepens. What once was emotional confusion becomes vibrational music. Each tone of feeling composes an invisible score that the soul recognizes immediately. Love, pain, calm, desire, all are notes of the same song. Awakening does not eliminate dissonances, it integrates them. Harmony is born from welcoming, not from denial. Simple gestures become portals of understanding. A touch, a shared silence, an attentive gaze. Everything turns into direct translation of the field. It is no longer necessary to ask so much, because the answer is already vibrating in presence. Feeling replaces discourse and makes communication more truthful. Words still exist, but function as frames around the invisible that truly matters. Deep emotional roots begin to loosen. To feel fully is an act of courage, because it requires passing through discomfort without seeking escape. Awakening does not promise constant lightness, but vibrational authenticity. Each accepted emotion becomes released energy. The body learns to trust the flow, even when the feeling is intense. At this point, to understand means to allow. Subtle fields interweave when feeling is shared. Two presences in coherence create a resonance network that goes beyond empathy. It is more than understanding the other, it is vibrating together. The boundaries of individuality become permeable, and communication begins to occur on a plane that precedes sound. Love, then, ceases to be a personal feeling and becomes a state of consciousness. To feel deeply is a form of silent prayer. The awakened soul does not need to ask for anything, because feeling itself is already a dialogue with the whole. Each vibration emitted returns in a spiral, bringing clarity, balance, and expansion. Understanding arises as a natural consequence of this flow. Translating feeling into words is still possible, but it becomes secondary, like describing the reflection of light without needing to look at the sun. Gazes are silent bridges that link fields of consciousness. In the instant when two beings meet with real presence, something happens that no word can reach. It is not an exchange of information, but of vibration. The space between these gazes becomes sacred territory, where time slows and the invisible reveals itself. What is perceived there is not image, but frequency, a kind of recognition that dispenses with translation. In aligned souls, the gaze works like a quantum mirror. It reflects what lies beyond forms, capturing nuances of internal states that the voice cannot express. This exchange is so precise that it can disarm old defenses, dissolve tensions, and restore emotional coherence without a single sentence. Awakening teaches that the gaze is a vibrational tool. Through it, the field communicates directly without mental intermediaries. True presences do not hurry. The pause between one gesture and another carries living density, as if the air acquired texture. The mind, accustomed to seeking meaning, tries to decipher this silence, but feeling has already understood. What is revealed in this interval is not a concept, it is pure experience. There, love manifests as clarity, not sentimentality, but vibrational lucidity. Atmospheres transform when the gaze is conscious. A tense environment can become calm through the meeting of two whole presences. The collective field responds to the inner state of the observer. Thus, peace ceases to be an idea and becomes an active frequency that influences everything around. The awakened gaze does not observe to understand, it observes to harmonize. Inner mirrors light up in genuine exchange. Seeing the other without trying to define is also seeing one's own hidden layers. The other's gaze becomes an instrument of self-knowledge, reflecting the parts that still ask for integration. This mirroring does not judge, it simply shows. That is why it is transformative. What is perceived in the other is, in essence, what vibrates in oneself. The difference is only one of perspective. Resonances amplify when there is emotional transparency. The gaze free of masks transmits purity, and this purity generates immediate trust. The quantum field responds to coherence. Where there is truth, there is expansion. Thus, the simple act of sustaining the gaze becomes a living meditation, a form of realignment between two universes vibrating in synchronicity. Sharing silence becomes its own language. Two beings who have already understood the power of this space do not need to look for a topic, because the encounter itself is content enough. The apparent emptiness is full of presence. Collective feeling expands, creating a field where the ego loses its function and love expresses itself effortlessly. To speak would be to break the music that silence composed. Invisible bridges sustain every form of real communication. The word is born from the gaze, not the other way around. Before speech happens, the field has already exchanged subtle information, intentions, memories, possibilities. The gaze is the origin of all languages, the portal where the invisible gains direction. Therefore, those who learn to see deeply rarely need to explain. Vision becomes immediate understanding. Celestial moments open in this vibrational meeting. The awakened gaze is a window to the infinite that inhabits each being. Through it, the universe observes itself. This perception dissolves the separation between observer and observed. There are not two, only the movement of consciousness experiencing its own light through different perspectives. The wisdom contained in this instant is silent and total. Entire lives can change in seconds of true encounter. The conscious gaze touches places that words would never reach. It reveals essence without adornment, calls the being back to the center, and invites it to remain present. This is the teaching hidden between one gaze and another. Truth does not need to be spoken to be understood. It only needs to be seen. Emotions are living forces, currents of energy that run through the body like invisible rivers. Each brings a code, information in the form of vibration that translates the state of the inner field. They are neither good nor bad. They are messengers. The awakened consciousness learns to welcome them without labels, allowing them to flow until they reintegrate into the whole. What once seemed emotional chaos becomes a harmonic score, where each note fulfills its function within the soul's symphony. Cycles of expansion and contraction trace the movement of emotions. Like subtle tides, they rise and fall as the field responds to life's experiences. Resisting these oscillations creates noise, while allowing the flow restores coherence. Quantum consciousness perceives the body as a vibrational laboratory, where each emotion is a datum that reveals the quality of the present moment. Observing this cycle without interfering is to practice the art of listening to one's own field. Ancient fragments stored in the body emerge in the form of sensations. The unconscious does not speak in sentences, but in pulses. Each unresolved memory vibrates like an echo asking for attention. The emotion that returns to the surface does not want to be fought, only understood. By welcoming what returns, the being allows the past to be rewritten in another frequency. Healing does not happen in time, but in vibration. Emotional currents also connect beings to one another. A loving thought can traverse distances, just as an impulse of anger can create dense waves in the collective field. Quantum consciousness recognizes this interconnection and assumes responsibility for what it emits. Feeling becomes a creative act. Each conscious emotion reorganizes not only the individual, but the subtle fabric of shared reality. Forms of emotional density dissolve when there is presence. Pure observation acts like light that dispels shadow. No state remains fixed before the consciousness that accepts it without judgment. Fear, guilt, desire, all lose rigidity when seen without resistance. The energy that was once stuck returns to its natural flow, and the field resumes pulsing in coherence. This is the alchemy of feeling, transforming emotion into vibrational wisdom. Places and people carry perceptible emotional imprints. Upon entering an environment, the subtle body immediately recognizes the frequency recorded there. This reading is instinctive, prior to the rational mind. Awakening consists of tuning perception to decode these signals clearly, without being absorbed by them. Thus, the being learns to keep its field in integrity, even when the external world vibrates in disorder. Moments of conflict become opportunities for expansion. Intense emotion, rather than being an enemy, is a passage to another level of coherence. It is enough to breathe and allow the body to translate what it feels. At the peak of turbulence, there is a seed of clarity waiting to be perceived. The mind tries to explain, but the heart simply knows. Surrender is the gesture that moves energy from stagnation to creative flow. Inner paths open when the being decides to observe instead of react. The pause between stimulus and response is the field where consciousness acts. In this pause, the body reorganizes, the nervous system slows, and energy finds direction. Emotion ceases to be brute force and becomes an instrument of self-knowledge. What once seemed weight becomes a portal. Moments of gratitude function as keys of coherence. When attention turns to what is alive and present, the entire field rises. Gratitude does not deny what is difficult, it integrates it, returning meaning to the movement. Each emotion, seen in this light, reveals its contribution to the balance of the whole. Awakening, then, does not seek to eliminate sensations, but to understand them as expressions of life itself in transformation. Inner horizons expand as the being learns to observe emotional waves without confusing itself with them. There is no wrong emotion, only vibrations asking for consciousness. Spiritual maturity is not the absence of feeling, but total presence in the midst of feeling. Those who live this practice begin to perceive the world more lightly because they understand that everything is flow, and that resisting is the only way to suffer. If this theme touched you, breathe for a moment and notice which emotion is vibrating inside you right now. Allow yourself to feel without translating. Just listen. Then write in the comments 777 so I know the vibration is present in you at this moment. And like the video, if this reflection helped make your field more conscious. Your sharing strengthens the network of those who are also seeking to learn to feel as a path to clarity. Words are born from the impulse to fill the void, but those who learn to listen to the field realize that the void does not exist. There is only fertile space. The silence between speech is the territory where the real shows itself without disguise. Reducing the verb is not retraction, it is refinement. Every pause becomes presence, and any instant of attention reveals a universe. Awakening leads to this natural economy of speech, not by effort, but because the essential no longer fits into sentences. Slow breaths reposition the inner rhythm. By slowing down, one begins to notice how much the excess of words creates interference. The verb used without awareness creates noise in the field, while the verb in coherence acts as a bridge between planes. Speaking less is choosing the timbre, the moment, and the intention of each sound. This selection is not censorship, it is vibrational art. Speech becomes like a brushstroke of light over the invisible space of the real. Emotional silhouettes dissolve when discourse gives way to listening. The mind, accustomed to responding quickly, learns the value of delay. To listen is to open portals. The absence of speech invites the other's energy to reveal itself fully. Thus, dialogue ceases to be a battle of ideas and becomes a field of resonance. Speaking less is offering space for the world to show what it is, instead of imposing what one thinks about it. Subtle tones of the environment begin to be perceived more clearly. The breeze, the distant noise, the vibration of a nearby presence, everything gains texture. This increase in sensitivity is a natural consequence of inner silence. The one who speaks little picks up more, feels more, understands without haste. It is not indifference, it is expansion. Quietness reveals dimensions that mental noise kept hidden. An invisible gestalt forms with each true encounter. The field between two souls adjusts according to the quality of shared attention. When speech is scarce and presence is full, the real manifests in an almost tangible way. It is as if the air acquired consistency, and space became a witness. Verbal language loses centrality, and the being's vibration begins to communicate what no explanation can reach. Relational threads regenerate through conscious silence. Instead of automatic reactions, a space of deep listening arises. The other is perceived without judgment, and understanding is born by attunement, not by argument. The pauses between words become intervals of healing. Each not said has been replaced by all the unspoken silence, carrying the same potential for transformation. Speaking less, in this sense, is allowing the truth to organize itself before being spoken. Small signs replace long speeches. A welcoming look, a slight nod, a shared breath. Simple gestures that say more than entire sentences. This communication is not superficial. It is the purest form of vibrational empathy. Awakening shows that presence communicates more than any sequence of sounds, and the deeper the silence, the more transparent the link between consciousnesses becomes. Inner lights turn on when the verb grows quiet. Silence acts as a catalyst for subtle perception. The outer world begins to reflect inner harmony, and the real manifests as a continuity of the inner state. Speech loses the role of control and takes on that of witness. Every word spoken from this point carries power because it is born of coherence, not necessity. Subtle planes respond to the frequency of quiet. Everything spoken in a calm vibration echoes more widely. Realities align with the silent intention that precedes speech. Thus, the awakened being understands that speaking less is not stepping away from the world, but participating in it at another level, where each gesture, each pause, each thought becomes part of a unified language. External worlds begin to reflect inner clarity. Relationships become simpler, intentions more transparent, life lighter. Speaking less makes room for the real to manifest in its own order. Truth does not need to be defended. It simply reveals itself when the mind ceases the effort to prove. At this point, silence is not the absence of sound. It is total presence. Subtle tides of perception connect realities that coexist in the same instant. The awakened consciousness perceives that the visible and the invisible are not separate worlds but overlapping layers of the same vibration. Between them, silence acts as a portal. It is not emptiness, but presence in its pure state, a point of passage where the mind does not command and feeling takes the lead. In this space, time dissolves, and the being experiences the continuity of everything. Inner shadows gain new texture under this expanded quiet. What used to be emotional discomfort reveals itself as a message from a deeper plane. Energy does not disappear, it only changes frequency, showing its pedagogical nature. Silence teaches without a voice, shaping perception until the human gaze can recognize the invisible order behind each chaos. Thus, darkness becomes an ally of light. Inner candles are lit in the crossing between dimensions. The old mind fears the unknown, but the awakened heart knows that every abyss is only a passage. Silence works like a compass. Within it, one senses the course without needing a map. Intuition becomes vision, and the body, an antenna. Each pause in speech, each deep breath, opens a corridor between planes of reality. What once seemed a mystery becomes direct experience. Mental mists dissipate when consciousness stabilizes at this neutral point. It is there that the language of energy shows itself in its pure form. Patterns, colors, densities, pulsations. There is no effort to understand. Understanding happens as a reflex. The being simply witnesses the quantum dance of the real reorganizing around their attention. Silence is the instrument, and also the answer. Veils of separation lose strength as presence deepens. The boundaries between the self and the whole become translucent. The observer feels the field reacting to each intention, and this synchronicity dissolves the illusion of loneliness. Everything responds. Everything is interconnected. Silence then ceases to be withdrawal and becomes communion. It is the language that unites planes, the sound prior to the word. Subtle portals open when the heart vibrates in quietude. Pure attention creates alignment between the inner and outer worlds. In this state, the being crosses realities without moving physically. It is the field that expands around them. This experience is not mystical in the usual sense. It is natural. Silence reveals the functioning of consciousness as a force that connects, translates, and transforms. Memories of other existences arise as luminous fragments. They do not arrive as linear stories, but as familiar sensations, knowledge not learned in this life. The silence between dimensions allows these records to be updated, not to reinforce the past, but to integrate it. The soul recognizes the continuity of its own journey and understands that nothing was lost, only redistributed in the flow of time. Subtle codes circulate through the field during this process. They are vibrational information that reorganizes the structure of the being, calibrating frequency and perception. Some call this expansion, others ascension. In essence, it is coherence being restored. Silence is the laboratory where this transmutation happens. It is there that consciousness learns to hear the pure language of the universe, a communication made of rhythm, light, and intention. Inner worlds mirror themselves in external phenomena. What happens outside is only a reflection of what vibrates within. Those who inhabit silence understand this intuitively. There is no need to control what manifests, only to adjust the inner state. The field's harmony is the filter that defines the kind of reality perceived. Thus, silence becomes a tool of creation. Those who align with it shape the real without needing to act. Constellations of consciousness form when several beings enter this same state of vibrational quietude. The joint presence creates a wave that crosses planes, connecting minds and hearts without any word. Love, in this context, is pure subtle physics, a force that organizes, attracts, and heals. It is in this kind of silence that the universe breathes through us, and we breathe through it. Invisible networks sustain all true encounters. The universe does not bring people together by chance. It organizes frequencies. Each vibration we emit creates a signature, and that signature finds resonance in similar fields. Thus, what we call affinity is in fact quantum synchronicity. The meeting between two souls happens before the gaze, before the word. It is the field that recognizes the field. Circles of connection form spontaneously when one being's frequency finds harmony in another's vibration. There is no effort, only natural recognition. Contact ceases to depend on the mind and begins to occur on subtle planes where feeling is the common language. This kind of encounter cannot be explained. It is perceived. The silence between two presences carries more content than hours of conversation. Webs of light expand as consciousness opens. Awakening makes the being more permeable, and this permeability allows the surrounding vibrations to be perceived clearly. It is as if the soul began to use new senses. Communication becomes multidimensional. It is not limited to speech or sight. It is a direct exchange of vibrational information, where the real reveals itself through attunement. Subtle threads connect hearts that have never physically touched. Sometimes the memory of someone arises out of nowhere. It is not coincidence, it is an echo of the field. Energetic connection transcends distance and time. Even without visible contact, there is exchange. Quantum consciousness understands that the true encounter does not depend on physical presence. It happens the instant two frequencies come into harmony, wherever they may be. Rivers of empathy flow through these subtle connections. The suffering of one sensitive being is perceived by another without a word being spoken. Likewise, the joy of an awakened heart spreads through entire fields. This phenomenon is not mystical, it is natural. Everything vibrates, everything communicates. Love in this context is not a feeling, it is a shared field of coherence. Inner pathways of recognition light up the instant the vibration is compatible. The soul knows before the mind. That is why certain encounters bring a sensation of remembrance, as if something ancient had been resumed. It is not a reunion of people, it is a reunion of frequencies. The field recognizes the harmonic pattern it already knows. The mind then tries to create a story to explain what the heart already knew. Brief manifestations of discomfort are also part of this process. Not every connection is smooth. Some bring to the surface what needs purification. When two fields meet, their vibrations interact and reveal hidden dissonances. The awakened soul understands this as an opportunity for adjustment, not as conflict. Each friction is an invitation to raise the frequency, to refine presence. Inner beacons light up in response to incoming vibrations. Conscious attention transforms the way we relate. Instead of seeking people, the being begins to cultivate vibrational states. Connections become a consequence of internal coherence itself. What one is attracts what resonates. Thus, the universe ceases to be a stage for seeking and becomes a mirror of frequency. Waves of communication occur on multiple simultaneous planes. Words still exist, but they are only the surface. The real dialogue takes place in the field before any sound. That is why presence speaks, even in silence. This vibrational communication is what keeps the fabric of life united. The awakened consciousness learns to trust it because it perceives that nothing is lost. Everything communicates on levels the mind cannot reach. Subtle auroras are born every time two souls recognize each other. The light of this encounter does not come from outside, but from the memory of what they have always been. This perception dissolves the sense of separation and inaugurates a kind of love that does not depend on possession, promise, or time. It is love as a quantum state, pure vibrational recognition. The awakened soul does not need to explain, it simply feels, and in that feeling, the entire universe recognizes itself as well. Inner breezes move through the being as if the world itself were breathing along. The mind no longer seeks to understand, only to accompany the subtle rhythm of presence. Everything that once was effort becomes natural. The simple act of existing is already expression. The verb grows quiet, but the field speaks for itself. The entire life becomes vibrational language, where invisible gestures carry the weight of truth. Crystals of consciousness shine where once there was noise. Clarity replaces the impulse to explain, and the gaze begins to reveal what the heart understands without a voice. In this state, love is neither idea nor emotion. It is the substance of everything. The real shows itself without filter, and the being recognizes that it has always been part of the same light it now observes. Silence is not escape, it is return. Inner and outer lines merge into the same point of presence. Awakening does not take one elsewhere, but returns one to the origin. Nothing needs to be proven because everything is already being lived. Conscious love does not speak of itself. It emanates. And those who reach this point no longer need to convince the world, only to vibrate in truth. If you felt this vibration until the end, write in the comments, "I am conscious frequency, so I know you've arrived here." And if this message touched your field, subscribe and share. This way we continue together expanding this presence that speaks even in silence.